Yes, we are back, and we're back at it again with another Dream Shakers episode 19 to be exact. And this time with another interesting guest. She's from Richmond, Virginia, DMV area, holds a bachelor's degree from the University of Virginia, UVA, received an MBA from Harvard, created a startup called Unshrink It, where she appeared on Shark Tank and eventually got acquired. She's previously worked for companies like Capgemini, Interpret, Vivitz, and Marriott International. Now, her focus is on something different, something greater. She works for MLT, where she has a sole focus on the career acceleration and development of Blacks and Latinos. Please give a warm welcome to Desiree Stolar. Thank you for joining us on the show.
George, I'm smiling over here, just thinking of someone else introducing me and giving it with such a voice. Thank you.
Appreciate you. How does it feel? You know, it's such a pleasure to have you on here. How are you feeling?
I'm feeling honored and I'm feeling excited to talk about why I've devoted the last 5 years of my life to MLT.
That's deep. That's deep. Well, but before we get into MLT, we don't want to spill the beans
Yeah,
or
I
juice
know.
here.
Yeah.
Let's take it all the way back. Let's talk about upbringing.
Ooh.
What was it
no.
like?
Oh no. Upbringing.
Okay. What was it like growing up in Virginia, Richmond to be exact? And why did you ultimately decide to come back to the DMV area after your time spent on the West Coast? And we also know that you studied abroad and everything like that. You spent some time in India. So just talk about that whole trajectory. We want to know it all.
Whew. All right. And here I thought only my mom cared about this life. But taking it back to Richmond, and for those of you who are from the area and you care, I'm from Midlothian, Virginia, South Side. But grew up in majority white spaces. And I say this right off the bat because I think it's important for people to bring their lived experiences and their context into the conversation because it shapes everything thereafter. And growing up, my father was the adopted son of a 14-year-old prison ward who was told by the state, you can either have this baby or you can go to prison. And my grandmother decided that she was going to have the baby and give him up for adoption. He was adopted by a woman who had fostered over 80 Black children in Suffolk, Virginia, and wanted to take care of this baby, and was undeniably brilliant, identified at a very young age as being just exceptionally smart. And so growing up in this all Black area of which, for those of you who are not familiar with Virginia or even Suffolk, it's about 50 miles southwest of Norfolk, which more people know. And growing up in a very supportive, thriving ecosystem of Black doctors and Black lawyers and Black barbers and Black teachers, my father was cultivated to be ambitious and to reach for it as high as he could go. And when he got to college, he had all these different offers from school. He applied to all these different schools, and this was 1968. And he was denied to most of them because he was a Black man. And the few that he did get into, it was very clear that the environment was one in which, from the honor code or from not having any locations for people to live who were of his skin tone, that even though he was as smart as he was, he could not get into any of the engineering schools that he was hoping to do. So at the last minute, he gets a call, and the Massachusetts Institute of Technology has reached out to him, and they said that they're going to do a pilot because there was a Jewish donor who was upset that there were no Black students at MIT. And he said, if I give you a certain amount of money, will you bring in just a handful of Black students? I will pay for their housing, I will pay for their education, but I want them there. And so my dad was one of the first 8 Black students at Massachusetts Institute of Technology in 1969. Still friends with the other Black men that they brought in that year, because there weren't any Black women. Started out with just men. And I say all of this as context to your question of, tell me about your upbringing, because my dad said that upon attending MIT, he realized that as smart as he had been, as accomplished as he could have been, simply by being in Suffolk, Virginia, and growing up in segregated schools, he realized once he got to MIT, what the other students had been exposed to when it came to math and to science and to the beginning stages of computing. And he swore, he said, if I have children, I'm going to, even if it's uncomfortable, even if it's isolating, I'm going to put them in the best possible school system I can once I get to that point, because the fact that the other Black men, and they felt like they were constantly having to catch up, because the best books and the best exposure that they got was still not at the level of some of their peers. So flash forward, he is at one of the top employers in Richmond. We are fortunate enough to be able to be one of the first Black families to move into my neighborhood. And that was because he wanted me to go to one of the top public schools in the area. He said, I'm not looking to play private school dollars, but I am going to put you in the best possible public school I can. And so growing up, I can count on one hand the number of Black classmates that I had. And of course, as soon as they arrived, we became fast friends, and my parents went out of their way to make sure that they befriended their parents and that we were engaging together. But I grew up in a environment, an ecosystem in which I was always the one. And thankfully, if it's all you know, for a certain point in your maturation, you just accept it as is. So in hindsight, now I realize why everyone on the swim team knew my name without any question. And I say, how is, there are 200 people in this team. How does they always know my name? Because I'm the only Black on the swim team. Why is it that for certain, why is it that everyone is aware of what I'm doing in the school, so on and so forth? So all I will say is that what is interesting is that I get to my teenage years, and my half sister, who is 10 years ahead of me, such a trailblazer, amazing mentor, knew that she wanted to go into finance. She said, I want to be where they make money. I want to be where they control money. I want to be where money is flowing. And so she studied finance as soon as she went to UVA. As soon as she graduated, she was joining financial firms. She went back to business school and went to Tuck, and then she went to Goldman Sachs because she said, I want to be one of the top firms in which money is handled. And when I reached my teenage years, she said, Des, I'm worried that you've never been around a lot of Black and brown people at the same time. And I said, what are you talking about? I'm around Black and brown people at church. What are you? And she said, no, but it's different when you're around Black and brown people of, people who are looking to do a similar pathway as you. It's a whole different orientation. So she encouraged me to do LEAD. And I'll never forget this. It was Duke Fuqua. I'm dating myself, but this was the summer of 2002. And show up on campus, and it was 60 of us, all Black and brown. So it was African-American, Latinx, and Native American students. And I remember being in culture shock. I called my mom the first week. I said, Mom, it's all Black people. it's all Black and brown people. And I've never, the living situation was all Black and brown people, the classroom setting, the events, everything. And it was the first time in which, instead of being defined by where they lived or the fact that we were in church together, I was actually discovering and creating meaningful relationships with people based off of commonalities and interests and aspirations and the whole 9 yards. And I remember thinking to myself that LEAD, and later it was En-ROADS, and later it was Reardon, that this was life-changing. and that I was going to forever be grateful for that. So anyway, long story short, because I don't want to take up too much time on what is probably a long list of questions. But I am the product of majority white spaces, and yet almost as a direct result of that, I am hyper aware of the power and the support that can come from being in a curated group of people who look like you and who have similar aspirations, and how that can create just an amazing and self-giving of a ever-giving ecosystem of inspiration and support. So let me pause there because you had other questions.
That is an immense amount of perspective that you are able to have, right? And the opportunity to be in a number of different impactful educational institutions, I think, is another common theme that showed through that response, and actually ties in very well into our very next question, right? So we did our due diligence. We read up on your background, and we saw that you ultimately decided to attend HBS, and we wanted to know
Yes.
what made.
Relax, Steph. She has the crimson on. She got the crimson
Oh,
on.
that's true. That's true.
That's true.
Representing.
Even to this day, very much still batting for the university. So, what made Harvard Business School the right choice for you? And given your involvement now as an alumni board member, what set of factors do you think led Harvard to choose you?
Oof. Well, one was patience. I knew that since I would say 21 that I wanted to go to business school. One, I mentioned that my older sister was a trailblazer, and she said, Desiree, if you want a stamp of validation in business, you need to go to business school. And she situated it as it was a must, not a nice to have, but a must. And I knew that I was worthy and capable of engaging with the very best. And so I knew that I wanted to have the best possible candidacy. And looking at my work in the first half of my 20s, I said, I haven't decided exactly what school it is to which I'm going to apply, but I know that they're looking for a few things: a great GMAT, progressive leadership in an organization and are doing just meaningful work, and someone who they feel has the capacity for even greater leadership. So in knowing that, I spent, no joke, and I hope this resonates with some people who are listening to this, 5 years working on the GMAT. I went through all sorts of preparatory programs, did self-study, did one-on-one tutoring, but I had stubbornly a lower score, and I felt as though it did not represent what I was capable of doing. Now, had I known about MLT, I might have had a coach tell me, Desiree, forget that darn score. You've got everything else going for you. Go ahead and apply to business school. But this is why stay in school, kids, stay in MLT. Because they'll lead you in the right direction. But at the time, I knew that was important to me. Second was that I had seen that a lot of my Black and brown peers had taken pathways that one, were accessible to them, but also didn't necessarily give them a chance to be differentiated as a leader. And I said, if I'm looking at the profiles of people who are getting into these top schools, at some point they took a calculated risk. And so at the tender age of 22, 23, I took the calculated risk of being employee number one at a startup for market research consulting. And literally from day one, we had big clients in the media, tech, and entertainment space with a lot of big expectations. But it gave me a chance to lead major projects, manage people, and to actually have real stories of both triumphs and failures heading into business school. And then finally was that I had served for 6 years with University of Virginia, and supporting their alums, particularly those alums that cared deeply about community service and just community orientation and supporting underrepresented groups, and had worked my way up over 6 years from just supporting on the community engagement to development to vice chair to chair. And so by the time I was actually applying to business school, I had finally mastered the GMAT. I felt as though I had a track record that was undeniable. And I had put myself in spaces in which other people had validated me as someone who could lead major initiatives or organizations. And so again, if you do MLT, you'll receive better guidance than that I had. But by the time I was ready to go, it was either that I was going to go part-time or I was going to go full-time to one program and one program only. And that was Harvard Business School. And the reason was I was 28, I was married, I was well ensconced at Marriott International. I felt comfortable, I was near my family. And I said, I am not disrupting my life unless it's for the very best business school in the world. Otherwise, I'm perfectly content to go part-time, get the degree on the wall, continue to progress. And they accepted me. And so it was literally that I had made a promise to myself that I would go. Now, I still freaked out at the last minute and said, this is a lot of money. This is 2 years. Do I still go? And to her credit, Dee Leopold, who was the former Dean of Admissions, had at least 6 or 7 people reach out to me, call me, which is a big deal for a millennial. We don't get on the phone that often. Call me and say why they felt HBS was life changing. And ultimately it came down to the network, the orientation for leadership, not on functional expertise. The expectation is that you will build your competencies over time, but how are you thinking, reacting, adapting, serving from a leadership capacity. And that's what I cared most about, was having a breadth of people that I could call on in times of need or in times of growth. And second, the orientation on leading to make a difference in this world, not to close books or to sell things, but how to make a difference.
You definitely found ways to make a difference indeed. And we appreciate you paving the way. Walk us through your mindset while you were in HBS and post HBS, and transitioning into unshrinking, right? Like, when was that time that Desiree said, this is the startup that I want to create, and I'm going to push forward with it no matter who says otherwise?
I wish I could tell you that I began with so much intentionality. That's been the hallmark of my time at MLT, but I will tell you that is not how I approach beginning my entrepreneurial endeavors. I frankly shrank a sweater that was so upsetting to me because my sister had just given it to me and had spent good money to give it to procure it, that I wanted to fix it. There was no commercial solution. Literally the week before, Harvard had announced they were going to give us $5,000 to do a micro business. And I said, well, my teammates are talking about artisanal mustard and socks and some betting app. And that all sounds like something I couldn't send back to my mom. And so I convinced them that there was enough heat on the internet with people on blogs and videos and websites looking for a solution to unshrink their sweater. Now, even then, school project mode. We wanted to be best in class. We wanted to impress our classmates. We wanted to get a few, $1,000 extra from Harvard to situate that we were really great. They actually had a stock market assessing each of the different micro businesses, and we wanted to be at the top of that. All the entire orientation was get a 1 in the class, which is not that grades even matter, but we wanted to be one of the best. And we thought we had a great product. It was a chemical solution that unshrank wool clothing, first time ever. So we thought we have filed a patent, we deserve a 1. That's what we wanted. Everyone went back into their real lives, private equity, consulting. Me, I went to brand strategy for tech. Everyone dispersed into what their normal lives were supposed to be. And the turning point, George, was that I'm sitting in finance class and my phone is buzzing. And I can't understand why some Somerville number is continuing to call me over and over in the middle of the morning. So as soon as class ends, I step outside and it's the grommet telling me that the product that they expected was going to take a few months to sell. I had given them about 200 bottles and they said, it's a new product. There's a lot to learn about it. We're really grateful to have it, but we think it's going to take a few months to sell all these bottles. They told me right in that moment that they had not only sold out of those bottles, but had oversold us by a couple thousand, thinking that we were a real business and had bottles already made. And they had told their customers that it would ship out in 72 hours. And they just wanted to call and double check before they sold more that, going over 2,000 would be okay. And I'm literally thinking, people are milling about me. It's the 10 minutes in between class 1 and class 2 in the morning. And I'm thinking to myself, it has been 4 months since I've made a bottle of this stuff. I'm pretty sure we don't have labels. We don't have any of the active ingredient. We don't have bottles. We don't have caps. I haven't even talked to these people about this product in a couple of months. Certainly didn't think it was going to take off as fast as it did. Do I lie and tell her, yeah, let's go? Or do I say, sorry, we're not quite there yet, but, try to deal with the fallout? And maybe it's the mark of an entrepreneur, but I was like, yeah, that sounds great. I'm so glad it's selling. Why don't we pause it now just so that we make sure that we're okay with those first 2,000, but then, let's keep going. And I hung up, took a deep breath, and then I went back in and I was like, hey, field 3 team, we were I think you need to cancel your weekend plans because we need to overnight a bunch of stuff and make all these bottles and have it ready in 72 hours. What my husband frequently says is that, he said, Des, it was a big sacrifice to send you there. But yes, you learned things in finance and accounting and operations and marketing, but Unshrink It was the crucible moment where you actually truly learn things. And I think in that moment, it was a recognition on my part that when someone gives you a rocket ship and says that you get to drive it, you should lean into that moment. And it's not as though I had to quit being a student, that I didn't have the ecosystem of Harvard, that I had to sacrifice that much. I tell a lot of people, it is exceptionally scary to become an entrepreneur. It's not as though I had to face a lot of fears and saying yes in that moment, but it was certainly leaning in and saying, I'm going to completely change my day-to-day. And instead of enjoying my second year and having relaxing courses, I switched everything up and changed my schedule. I allotted only 4 hours to social time. I was a student for a few hours. I was an entrepreneur for most of the day. And then I was a student again right before I went to bed at midnight. So it required adaptation, but it did not require the same level of risk that a lot of other entrepreneurs do. But yeah, I just jumped into entrepreneurship and then looked and then looked back as the rocket ship took me off. Yes.
Okay, so you're on the rocket ship.
I am on the rocket ship.
It's going. You got the orders coming in. You got the Shark Tank episodes. This thing is reaching this critical mass and everybody's in love with Unshrink It. The question we have for you is, what led you to ultimately decide that at this time, I'm going to step away, I'm going to sell the company, and I'm going to go down a different path? And having the perspective you have now, would you have still made that same decision?
Well, I would hope so, MLTers, but but it was 2-step. Running a company is almost like having another baby. And the first step was extricating myself from the day-to-day. The second step was then, okay, I'm willing to sell this. And I'll tell you the catalyst for the first step was that I had just been given the reins to the company. They had voted me from chief commercial officer to CEO. And I was ready to go. I was doing pitch competitions. I was talking to VCs. I was improving our formulation. I was improving the labeling and putting us into international distribution, multiple systems to go. And everyone had told me, when you hit your 30s, don't wait if you know you want to have children, because if you know you want them, why would you jeopardize having them later and having sort of complications? And my mom said, oh, Desiree, I had 3 and it was no big deal. You guys are so easy. I could have had so many more. So I said, why not? I'll do this now. I'm running my own company. No one else, I don't have to have maternity leave or anything of that nature. I became horribly sick. I was that 5% of women who is nauseated all day, every day during their pregnancy. And so I went overnight from feeling like I was top in the world to realizing that my body physically wouldn't allow me to be the type of CEO that I wanted to be. And literally this hit it. The moment was that I fainted in the TSA line on my way to a pitch competition in Miami, and woke up, and everyone else around me thought I was gonna pick up my stuff and go back home. And I said, oh no, I'm getting back on the plane. And I had to tell everyone, the flight attendants, the hotel, the organizers, about my condition. And every hour I was getting sick. And I, by the time I got home, I said, you know what? I need to recognize that for whatever reason, God wants me to not see this through the way I expected. And so I immediately picked up the phone and reached out to both contacts at HBS and also contacts that I picked up in the entrepreneurial circle, and said, I need help. I need people to help out with the sales. I need people to help with the fulfillment, customer service. I need a whole ecosystem around me, because ultimately I cannot crawl on the floor and fulfill all these orders and think that that's okay when I'm creating life. So that was the first step, which allowed me, by extricating yourself and realizing that you could have a whole team of people doing it with you, for cost reasons, for control reasons, for a whole host of reasons. Entrepreneurs usually do a lot of that on their own. But I was compelled to actually bring in a whole team around me. Ran that for another year. And then it was, child was born, child was thriving. Hashtag good job, William. And I said to myself, well, do I want to go back to working 20 hours a week on this? This was that was an incredible ride, but now it's well set up where I could spend 4 hours a day doing this, and it's still making a similar amount of money. So what should I be doing now? There was that, personal clarity moment of, do I want to throw myself back into a laundry cleaning space, or do I want to translate everything that I've learned in the first 13, 14 years of my working life to other people? And I couldn't get over the fact that when I was at HBS, the Black and brown people who had completed MLT were on a whole different plane than all of us who came in wide-eyed, feeling heavy imposter syndrome, no internship secured, feeling as though we constantly had to prove ourselves. And I said, there's so many things that I learned the hard way. And if I can help the next generation behind me just make 1 or 2 steps in the best possible manner, I think I should try it. So I actually walked in to MLT when I was pregnant, saying that I wanted to help out from a volunteerism standpoint. And they recognized very quickly that I brought the Fortune 500 experience, the consulting experience, the top business school exposure, running a company. I think I'm personable. And they convinced me pretty quickly that being an alumni director would be mutually beneficial. And frankly, I have not looked back. So that's that.
And you are personable, by the way. There's no denying that.
Thanks, George. Thanks, George.
Of course, anytime.
And postscript to your question.
Yeah.
I worked at MLT for 2.5 years before I sold the company, because once I was in place, I thoroughly enjoyed still, being the point person for everything that was happening and representing the company. But I then had the patience to look for the right buyer. So anyway, it was 2-step process. One was removing myself from the day-to-day, and then the second was finding the right buyer in my own schedule.
You said something that resonated a lot with me, in that you wanted to help the next generation move and progress forward. you played a pivotal role in the career extension of more than 8,000 Black and Brown professionals through your work at MLT. Um, Talk about what that ultimately has done for you, or what is that feeling that you go through, like, when you shut your computer off, you're done with work, and knowing that you played some type of impact in someone's life. Because I'll you know be upfront and say, and I don't know if I've told you this before, but definitely appreciate you for the work that you do. I know Steph does as well, but I will never forget, and I'm sure you remember this too, when there was like a MLT gala event, right? And like at that point, I felt like I didn't have things together, or I didn't want to stop by. I'm like, I felt like an MLT gala event was when you show out, right? Like, people have done their careers in IB or private equity or consulting or going to business school, or like, have some semblance of success. And I felt like I wasn't there yet. And so I was like, you know what, I'm not gonna go. But I remember when you reached out and you were like, hey, Jordan, I'm coming to New York. I want to see you there. Let's make this happen. And so that like stuck with me a lot, and I appreciate you, because Steph and I took so much from that gala. But talk about what it feels, and how you impacted the MLTs.
I am deeply fulfilled by being in this role. And I cannot underscore how important it was for me to, as quickly as possible, find an organization and a role and a team in which I felt as though the work being done was not just important work, but also had meaning. When we were in Harvard Business School, year one, they split us up, and they had all the women review some stats on the longevity of the careers of alums over the past several decades. And they said, even though we have had women who have graduated from the top business school in the country, had very illustrious careers, when we look 20, 30, 40 years down the line, they are no longer in the workforce. And it is at levels that still surprise us. And so they were starting to do a better job of trying to situate with people courses such as, what does it mean to be happy? What does it mean to be an authentic leader, and to develop that within others and within yourself? What does it mean to triangulate what you are good at doing, what you provide value to others doing, and where you are well compensated? And I said to myself, my parents have made so many sacrifices for me since birth. And my spouse is making sacrifices for me to be at this school. I have made some tough moves and really leaned into opportunities that scared me at times, because I wanted to be at this point in my career. It's the idea that 5 to 10 years down the line, I'm in a role in which I am unfulfilled or feel underappreciated, or where the work just doesn't seem like it makes sense. They said for a lot of women, when faced with that reality, or taking care of something that came out their body and loving it and nourishing it, they're going to choose the latter. They're not going to try to merge the two. It's a very easy decision. And I said, I'm not going to set myself up for that mutually exclusive pathway. I'm going to try to find something where I feel driven to, as soon as I get up and have taken care of necessities, that I'm excited to open my laptop and to see who's emailed me and to dive into the work that needs to be done. And so I can say definitively that I have multiple lists, things that have to get done today, things to support the team, things that we're doing for the year. But I have ambitions for 2, 3, 5 years down the line, things that I want to do with alumni engagement, because I always feel as though there are so many other ways in which we could support this community. And if anything, the last year has crystallized for a lot of people why the work is so important. And I speak sometimes to business units and organizations about the work that needs to be done with diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I always say to people, talent and potential are equally distributed. Opportunity is not. And my role in this organization is to facilitate the opportunities and to ground it with informed guidance and with a supportive network that can catapult everyone in this community to the next phase and the next ambition of their lives. That work never ends. Even when people are senior leaders, and I just started a fellowship for senior executives, the questions become more fraught, the pathways more precarious, and the needs, the demands of what they want to do become all the more ambitious, because they're no longer satisfied with just quote an advancement. They want to have a legacy. They want to have impact. They want to establish themselves as thought leaders. And so I'm just deeply motivated by this work every day, and it never gets tiring. By all means, there are tiring days, but the work does not get tiring. So.
Last year, challenging, to say the least. A number of events took place that really made the struggles that our community faced a lot more real for members that don't belong to our communities. And in the wake of that, we saw a large variety of announcements from corporations stating their desire to bring in more candidates that come in from minority backgrounds, that come in from BIPOC backgrounds. And given the role that MLT has played for the longest of time in trying to convince corporations that, hey, there's a vibrant population here of candidates that, you just, maybe haven't considered, that, maybe you should look at a little bit.
Hello, wake up. Hello.
Not a pipeline issue.
What role, do you believe MLT will take on in this space moving forward, now given the fact that everyone's seemingly woken up?
Wide awake. We thankfully, wonderfully, excitingly, we are already there. And what I said to people is that it is not as though we didn't know the work that needed to be done. It's not as though we didn't have plans and teams and ambitions for what MLT should be doing and ready to go. If anything, the past year has been incredible, because we knew that people needed advisory services on what is great DEI. How do you approach recruiting? How do you approach communications, decision-making, retention, development? We knew that people needed certification on what Black equity means in the workplace and how they can best achieve that and how they can hold themselves accountable. We knew that a lot of organizations were perfectly content to limit their engagement with Black and Brown communities at campus recruiting only, because that's supposedly the only place we can be found. And yet there are untold numbers of people with experience who are excited to join companies outside of a university setting, and for whom, as someone put it aptly on LinkedIn, talent tennis should not be the go-to mechanism where you just pick off great talent at other great companies and think that you have somehow made a difference. You should be looking for unfound talent. You should be looking for people who have been searching and trying to break into your space. And because they come from non-feeder schools or from non-feeder roles or from experiences that don't necessarily lend themselves to a direct algorithm match could actually yield a highly effective and competent add to your team and to your organization. So the great thing is that MLT has known all these things, and what is happening, sorry, there's going to be life, fire truck. It's too bad my son isn't here. He's so excited. But it is not as though we weren't ready to press go. If anything, we were waiting for everyone else to realize we were here ready to go with them. And so in summer of 2020, when, yes, a lot of organizations, institutions, and foundations and philanthropists woke up and realized, my gosh, you can support Black and Brown people after high school. My gosh, there actually is a pipeline, but we have to find and work and develop them after they leave undergrad or after they graduate from business school. My gosh, you cannot just assume that because you've hired Black and Brown people that there are managers and leaders there that know how to engage them and to support them and to develop them in a way that they will stay there. So the organization has seen exponential growth because all of these different entities have turned to us now and realized we are one of many, frankly, MLT is not the only one, but one of many organizations that have been doing the work for a while and have the systems and the playbook and the know-how to help them going forward. I'll just say on a individual level, when I speak to organizations, one of the things that I hope reorient to them is that your statements are just statements. And they're lovely, and I appreciate the signaling, and I appreciate the thought behind it. And yet, what matters to most alums, and the reason why I'm on the phone with most of the MLTers who are struggling at a firm, is not because of your statement. It's not because your C-suite or your board does not care about Black lives or does not care about the lack of equity. It's because a manager has made them feel uncomfortable or disrespected or not visible. It is because a team is not appreciating their work or elevating their opportunities or giving them growth paths. It is because a unit is not positioning them for advancement or giving them access to sponsors. And so what I have challenged a lot of groups is to say, you can point fingers and get upset with your organization that they have numbers that do not reflect the representation of certain groups. But if you have one Black person on your team, one, what are you doing to make sure that one Black person is there a year from now? What are you doing to make them feel welcome, to create a sense of belongingness, to champion their work, to introduce them to some of the people that you know in the company that could help move them forward, to be a colleague that both challenges them and engages with them in a way that is respectful, that listens to them. And if you can see that a year from now that person is there, then that's your marker of success. Not that this organization has moved up 2 percentage points, because who knows what's going to happen in 2 years from now, but you need to focus on the people on your team because that is your circle of control. There's a lot to care about in this big DEI space, but your circle of control is who is on your team today and how have you engaged with them in such a way that they're still here tomorrow and next year. And that freaks some people out because they realize that they've been putting the onus on other people, talent acquisition, DEI, the C-suite, the unit leader. And they're like, oh, wait, I'm the manager. I've got some work to do. So anyway, that's what's MLT is ready. We've got everything they need, the stats, the playbook, the people, the guidance. We're ready to go.
Now, we know that you guys are doing some work at MLT and you're grinding at the pavement, but we're jumping the gun a bit. If possible, could you break down what MLT is to the audience and what are the programs that MLT offers? So that
what? None of you have gone to MLT.org and you don't know anything about MLT? No, okay. Let me just break down management leadership for tomorrow. Way too many, way too many words and letters in there. But management leadership for tomorrow, founded in 2002 by the wonderful John Rice. Shout out. With the ambition of diversifying senior leadership in corporate America. And he knew that couldn't start by working with people at the very top levels. He wanted to make sure that it was not just quick fixes, but systematic change. And so going back and working with a lot of different leaders at Boston Consulting Group, the NBA, Harvard Business School, they identified that there were key inflection points in which people who had the competency, the desire, the ambition to actually advance were falling out of the pipeline and were feeling as though corporate America was not for them and they're going in a completely different direction. And so he said, I want to make sure that talented, high potential Black and brown students at the undergrad level, we're intercepting them right when it matters for them to have an impactful internship, and make sure that they are learning, that they are getting exposure, that they are securing the opportunity upon graduation for a high trajectory role. That's career prep. Then they said the next inflection point is that we need to make sure those people are having high visibility projects, good mentors, and are actually putting themselves in a position to get into top business schools. Because of whether people like it or not, that is a stamp of validation that gets thrown on the wall that can be a gate to people thinking that you are capable and worthy of other roles. And so we wanted to make sure that people were preparing to get into business school, having early access to admissions officers, and thinking intentionally about why they were going to certain schools and how it was going to be the lever by which they accomplished X. That's MBA prep. We then soon realized that those 2 years are really critical, and optimizing what you do during that time and making sure that you are well situated for what you do afterwards is so critical. And frankly, it is incredibly time consuming to recruit at the same time that you're supposed to be building your network, establishing yourself as a leader with extracurriculars, doing the casework. And so he said, I'm going to get these folks internships before they even matriculate business school. So that became MBA professional development, early access to top employers, and securing the summer internship and the job before they even got to school. And then finally was what for many people can become this nebulous period in which you are trying to reach the executive levels and you feel as though you've been heads down doing the work, and yet now it is becoming a lot less clear. We don't think you have executive presence. We don't think that you could engage with our top clients. We don't think you can bring in new business. We don't think that you have the orientation to manage others. And so all of a sudden you have all of these wonderful, accomplished Black and brown people who are petering out at the director, senior director level. And so Career Advancement Program was created to create this joint effort between the organization and the fellow of saying, we think you have capacity to be a leader here. And the fellow saying, I want to advance at this organization and thrive here. So together they go in as a sponsored unit, and Career Advancement Program is to help ensure as many people as possible are actually advancing to executive level. I'll just close out by saying it's been honor of a lifetime to start what is likely the 5th and final fellowship in that ecosystem, the continuum of MLT, and that was to help senior executives in the alumni community answer the question of what's next now that they have arrived at an executive level. And for a lot of them, figuring out what to do with their time, energy, and capital when they have a ton of optionality is actually a very difficult circumstance to find themselves in, because they know what they want to optimize what they are capable of doing. And sometimes that means staying where they are. Sometimes that means taking a calculated risk and going to a different size firm, a different region, and pursuing that C-suite and or just senior opportunity. Other times it is completely outside of the career setting, and they're thinking, I have the title and the influence and the capital to have a real impact. after 15, 20 years of being accountable to everyone else, now I want to be accountable to myself, to my family, to my community, to my country. And I want to think about, what am I doing on boards, in social impact circles, with my wealth, with all of the influence that I hold at this time, to make sure that from an economic justice standpoint, I am having my voice heard and seeing the type of community and country being molded that I think my family and my community are worthy of seeing. So anyway, that's MLT in a nutshell. We have complemented that with advisory services, with recruiting, with our equity certification, Black Equity at Work, because at the end of the day, and I love this, there's obviously the recognition of what needs to happen on the fellow side to advance and to accomplish certain outcomes, but there is just as much onus on the institutions and the organizations to be ready to receive these people, to develop and retain and to support these people as they come in. And so now with that dual approach, I'm just very excited for what's to come for MLT and for organizations that care deeply about seeing a more just, a more equitable, and a more representative America.
Sure. And thank you for that beautiful breakdown. That was amazing. Staying on the topic on equity, though.
Yes.
We know that, MLT has been that organization that's trying to push diversity and BIPOC candidates, right? How do you think MLT could thread that needle moving forward, and do an even better job of sourcing candidates that come from lower socioeconomic backgrounds, disenfranchised communities, impoverished communities, who aren't exposed to those corporate spaces, or don't know, or who are stuck in their bubbles, right? Wanted to hear from you on that.
What excites me about where MLT is today is that we are about to become a bit disruptive in the best of ways, as John Lewis would say, get into good trouble. Historically, it was, there are so many different signals that certain institutions, let me be even more specific, certain corporations, where there are ideal pools of candidates that they're looking. There are preferred feeder schools, preferred feeder organizations that they're looking for. And so that's where MLT started, because we wanted to say, well, we know there are Black and brown people who can play there. We're going to support them, develop them have those markers of success that you're looking for, and then we'll put them in institutions. But to your point, George, that is not where you're going to find it. Well, if we're going to move beyond talent tennis, then you need to start digging deeper and you need to start going broader. And so what excites me about the next 3 to 5 years, and I'll speak to this to the extent that I can, but there are foundations and organizations that agree with MLT that we have to be going broader and deeper and finding and engaging students that have just as much potential and capability, but may not be in the same ecosystems that they're normally used to finding people. And what they are looking to do is actually to support us in taking what we know works, the playbook, the coaching, the bar of success, the network, and allowing us to take what is likely the most, I would say, life-altering program, career prep, which is intercepting people as, you apply as a college sophomore, you start as a college junior. We're looking to now take that across hundreds of colleges, where there will be satellites of career prep, where instead of limiting ourselves to the 400 that are at the top schools, and that we have all these relationships with, to actually expand that to cover as many schools and as many Black and brown people as possible, knowing that we have in many ways cracked the code on what needs to happen at that point, but supporting them where they are and in a direction what they want to go. So it's not as though we have a great presence in Ohio, in Alabama, in Colorado, and Nevada. And yet those state schools are opportunities for us to intercept and to support a lot of Latinx and Black students who wouldn't necessarily have gone through the usual schools that we have most of our career prep fellow candidates coming from. So that's probably going to be by far the biggest change that you'll see over the next 5 years, is just the scope of support and the breadth of people that career prep is serving. And once you have those people in the MLT pipeline, then you have people who are then thinking about business school and thinking about what it will take to be a top candidate for business school. And so then you have not just a few hundred, but several thousand students across the country who are on an accelerated pathway for not just business school, but for the careers that come thereafter.
That is a major development. I don't know for our audience out there if you understand quite how impactful something like this is going to be for MLT, both as an organization, but also as a fellow going through the program. That is a completely different experience. There are so many questions that begin to arise. Good questions though, but challenges nonetheless. So, some of the things that I'm thinking about just in regards to that topic is, and you may not be able to delve too deep into this because this is still live and it's still changing, it's still dynamic, but what relation would that have for coaches, right? Like how does that system look in this revised format? And also, what are conferences when everyone across the country can have access to these resources? And then additionally, when you begin to scale this conference,
excitement, yes.
How do you control the quality of the learning, right? Again, you're branching out satellite campuses, things of that sort. I understand this will probably scale over time.
Yes.
But what are some of the just the initial thoughts on how you're going to tackle some of these challenges, and then we can navigate to the next question. But crazy.
I'll be brief, only because the one group I barely touch on are the fellows at the college level, because I'm helping everyone thereafter. But I will just tell you this, and what I have seen from the organization and all the smart people behind the scenes that are doing this, there are very ambitious thoughts on how do we, instead of having all in, number one, 2020 proved that everything that we do could be done in a hybrid model and be done well, and to be done in an enriching and accelerating manner. So once you know that, which we had, if it's not broke, don't fix it. Prior to 2020, it was always in person. It was almost the anathema to say, oh, let's move to virtual. No. But now we know that for a large scale, serving thousands of people, that we have the ability to scale that from a virtual perspective. But then separately, it is thinking, how are we supporting people? The most accelerating support you can give to someone is helping them understand how to advance in a particular pathway and or in a particular sector. And so now it's starting to think through, how do we get smart and having almost hubs of within career prep? Because one could argue before it was this unwilling mix of 400 people that all had different aspirations. And now you have the scope where you could have solely 400 or 500 that all care about tech, finance, real estate, VC, private equity. So if anything, it's the only thing I think we're guarding against is not forcing people down a pathway too early before they've had any time to really explore and trial and error. But from the coaching perspective, it is, thankfully, I think the average tenure of a career prep or MBA prep coach is around 9 or 10 years. So you have all these legacy people who can translate over the lessons learned, the experiences, and that's the institutional knowledge. But then a lot of our work is over the past decade has been captured in Salesforce and really powerful tools that can be leveraged by people and scaled up in a really meaningful way. So in that sense, there is so much planning going on behind the scenes, of all of which I'm not perfectly privy to, but they are being very intentional on how they translate the very best of career prep 2000s, but also adapting the program to serve a the type of scale that we know it's worthy of doing. And I just want to underscore, because you said this is an important program. The number that I'll never get over is that on average, a career prep graduate is leaving graduating with a role in which they are receiving $75,000 a year. And yet a little about half of career prep students would qualify as low income households when they enter college. So we are literally creating generational economic mobility and allowing people to not just position themselves for a much different trajectory on their own, but they are now in a position to support their families twofold in what their own parents are bringing in. And so the idea that you could take that from hundreds of people to thousands of people, particularly after how we saw the pandemic exacerbated socioeconomic differences last year, I just think that's so inspiring. And I'm impatient for us to get it done. So yeah.
I think these are all great points. We are nearing the.
I know you're playing with fire here, because at any point there can be two toddlers running in.
Yeah. So we want to definitely be considerate of your time. So this will lead us to our final question.
Okay.
You know, here at Dream Shakerz, we're all about paying it forward, right?
Okay.
And we want to make sure that our audience also gains some additional jewels, some additional life coaching through these conversations. So what would be 3 pieces of advice that you would give your younger self?
Number 1, it's okay to ask for help. It is not a sign of weakness. It is a sign of self-awareness of what you may lack or what you need to know, and to lean into that. Number 2, thank you notes never go out of style. Thank people early and often. People bring, you do not know what's going on behind the scenes in people's lives. And if they are uplifting you, advising you, serving you, you should lean into thinking genuinely and as early as possible. It will just be the gift that keeps giving. And 3 is to lead with empathy. And I say that because I probably speak to a cool 500 alums a year. And I always start with, how are you doing this hour? And how, I know you may have signed up to talk about X, but what's going to be most helpful as of right now? And I find that, and this is a cultural thing, that a lot of Americans are very focused on transactional relationships and defining people by what they do, and creating perceptions of people based off of how they present themselves on some channel. And yet everyone has something deeper going on behind the scenes. And so I have found that I've been effective in this role, at least I hope I have, because I always begin conversations and engagements with a deep sense of empathy that I will never know what's going on behind the scenes, and yet someone is still taking the time to reach out to me, to engage with me, to support what MLT is doing. And so I think the earlier you realize that, one, the more effective you'll be in day-to-day engagements, and also people will feel as though, in light of whatever other business arrangement or nature of the conversations going behind it, that you are someone worth having in their ecosystem beyond that specific instance or transaction.
Wow. We greatly appreciate you, Desiree. It's such a pleasure to have you. We want to give you your flowers for being a dream shaker and empowering us and spending time with us. We know you have a busy schedule, but we truly appreciate it and Thank you for your time. Thank you for everything.
For you, George, anytime, anytime.
Aww.
Anytime. Thank you guys for the invitation. Thank you for the thoughtful questions, for the due diligence that you did on my background. It was great to talk to you today.